Hey, what's up guys? Thanks for stopping by the channel. About a year ago, Longines released one of my favorite GMT watches for 2022, and that is the Zulu Time. This was part of their Spirit Pilot collection and had a 42mm case diameter, which, to be honest, was a bit large for those with an average wrist. Now fortunately, Longines was listening to consumer feedback and just released this 39mm iteration of the Zulu Time. So for this video, we're going to take a look at the more compact Zulu Time and talk about what it brings to the table if you're in the market for a new GMT watch. This year, in 2023, we've seen a lot of inflation, and watch brands weren't really immune to this, so many Swiss brands did raise their retail price of their watches by as much as a few to about over 30% JLC. All this to say that compared to last year's Zulu Time, the current MSRP for this Longines GMT, regardless of the size you buy, will cost you an additional 350 Canadian dollars. And this brings the grand total for the Longines Zulu Time to 3,950 Canadian. That being said, I still think this watch is very competitively priced for what you get. And for example, it's more than $1,000 cheaper than an equivalent sized GMT from like Tudor in their Black Bay Pro. This 39mm Zulu Time features the same Traveler's GMT caliber movement featured in the 42mm version. It has the same great finishing on the case and the bracelet. And as well, you get a similar dial layout, it's just in more of a condensed package. With respect to overall dimensions, this watch is in fact 39.1 millimeters to my calipers when you measure the case diameter. It is 46.8 millimeters lug to lug. But if you do include those male end links of the bracelet, the length is actually extended by a few millimeters on either side of the watch. It's fairly compact at 13.5 millimeters in thickness compared to the 42mm version. The OEM bracelet does sit between an odd 21mm lug opening, but it does taper nicely down to 16mm before you get to the signed Longines clasp. Now the clasp has a simple twin trigger releasing mechanism with 5 levels of micro adjustment anchoring points. And for sizing the bracelet, individual links have friction fitted pins that can be pushed out, for example, just using a pin press if you need to remove some of those links. I should also mention that the solid end links have Longines quick release system, so you can actually just depress the button on the back and then you can detach the bracelet from the watch head with ease. Unfortunately, that odd 21mm lug spacing does make it harder to accessorize with straps in that particular size. But over the years, I've actually collected a few 21mm straps. I just really wish they went with an even 20mm lug spacing, considering that this is a 39mm watch, and it would be a bit more proportional that way in my personal opinion. But fortunately on the wrist, this 39mm Zulu Time wears very comfortably, weighing in at 145 grams on the supplied stainless steel bracelet and sized up for my 7.5-inch wrist. That is 19 centimeters in circumference if you're using the metric system. And you can actually see that this watch stays firmly planted on my wrist, and I enjoy that nice 5mm taper of the bracelet. And by contrast, the 42mm Zulu Time didn't have the same comfort on the wrist due to the longer lug-to-lug length. And I do think it had a bit more wrist presence. It was almost 20 grams heavier on its supplied bracelet. Personally, I think I could pull off either of these watches, but definitely found the 39mm option to be more suitable for long-term comfort. Now, with respect to the dial design for this timepiece, it's very well finished and familiar for those who have had hands-on experience with the past 42mm iteration. You have polished and applied Arabic numerals as the hour indicators, and there is a date window cutout that does replace the 6 o'clock marker. Swiss BGW9 lume can be found coding the Arabic numerals as well as the hands and the triangle on the bezel, and this gives good legibility and orientation in low lighting situations. Now the lume is evenly applied and lasts a decent amount of time, but it's not as good as the lume that's found on the 42mm Zulu Time in my personal opinion, particularly on the numerals, which are in fact larger on the 42mm model. Now you do have the same text on the dial for the 39mm version of the Zulu Time when compared to its larger cousin, so that means you got the same Longines printing with the applied logo and the words automatic near the 12 o'clock position, and Zulu Time, the 5-star motif, and chronometer just above a date window. Considering this watch has a more condensed dial, I do actually wish that they removed the 5-star designation on this 39mm version of the watch. To me, it's a bit of a redundant statement to have a 5-star rating when you have the words chronometer printed just below it. And I've actually found this true for, like, say, some Rolex sports models when they have the words officially certified under that superlative chronometer text. I just think it would free up some more space on the dial that way, personally. The hour and the minute hands are sword style and highly polished, with a fine tip seconds hand that does have a rectangular tip that stretches over the raised minute track. And the GMT hand is mostly color matched with the dial, while the last third of it does have a nice orange triangle tip to it. I personally wish that this GMT hand was a little bit more pronounced and completely orange, but that's purely a stylistic choice. In terms of operation of a GMT, you have that Longines caliber L844.4, and this is based off of an ETA caliber under the Swatch Group, but it is highly modified and it's exclusively used by this brand. This is a true traveler's GMT, and it allows for isolated adjustment of the hour hand when the crown is unscrewed and opened up to that first position. This allows you to set the local time when traveling, and it also drives that date wheel forward or backwards as you cross midnight. This movement also has hacking seconds, manual wind capabilities, as well as a nice 72-hour power reserve, and it vibrates at 3.5 Hertz, and is also anti-magnetic due to the monocrystalline silicon balance spring. Now, to aid in tracking the multiple time zones, you do have a 24-hour bi-directional ceramic bezel. And I'm happy to report that the action on this 24-click bezel is snappy and precise, with a very refined feel to it. I do also appreciate that the ceramic bezel insert color matches the dial quite well, but it is a bit glossy for my personal taste. And regarding the case and the bracelet finishing, it's mostly a brushed finish with very fine polished accents throughout, and at the level of the case you have a nice beveled polished transitional line that runs from one end of the lug all the way to the other, and the lugs themselves are cropped, angular, and finely brushed to match the case flank. The bracelet is also finished very well, with fine polished reliefs on the distal portions on the center links. And the crown is a nice size and screwed down, affording this watch an impressive 100 meters of water resistance, and it's also signed with the Longines vintage logo. So as a complete package, the finish work and attention to detail on this watch is really amazing for the price segment, and I think it's really at the level of Omega or Tudor. So taken together, I think that this Longines Zulu Time is a very compelling GMT if you want to get into an everyday pilot watch around the 4K price point. Now there were some minor annoyances like the odd 21mm lug opening, a bit of a cluttered dial, and just having average lume on the hour markers that I think can be improved upon for future Spirit GMT models. But if you have an average or modest sized wrist, I would take this watch over the Tudor Black Bay Pro and the 42mm iteration of the Zulu Time. But as always guys, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the 39mm Longines Zulu Time in the comments section of this video. And do you think this watch works better in a sub 40mm package? Now, if you do enjoy this content, please consider subscribing to the YouTube channel. It really does help me out. And as always, I can't wait to catch you guys in the next video.